It's been 50 years since Martin Scorsese made his first feature film, Who's That Knockin' at My Door? The rest is film history. Although he's known for his investigations of mobster pathology, he's explored a variety of genres, from female-driven dramedy Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore and black comedy The King of Comedy, to horror remake Cape Fear and historical fiction adaptation Age of Innocence. Silence, the director's latest film, is a polarizing creation, loved by many while dismissed by others as overlong and unusually restrained for Scorsese. Which leads us to ask, how Scorsese is Silence? An adaptation of Shusaku Endo's novel, Silence follows two Jesuit priests from 17th century Portugal, Rodriguez, played by Andrew Garfield, and Garupe, played by Adam Driver, searching Japan for their vanished mentor, Liam Neeson's father Ferreira, who apostatized or renounced his belief after undergoing severe torture.
He is Sawa no Chuan now, a man who has found peace. Let him guide you along his path, the path of mercy.
At first glance, Silence feels very different for Scorsese. There's no slick, fast-moving camera work, rapid editing, or Rolling Stones soundtrack. But when you look in more detail, Silence does incorporate many of the techniques we associate with Scorsese's best films. If the setting and specifics seem to be a departure, the film still speaks to Scorsese's deepest career-wide interests and themes, and given that Silence was a passion project 25 years in the making, the subject is clearly close to the director's heart.
For a long period of time, I was fascinated by stories of the missionaries when I was about 8 or 9, 10 years old. And I wanted to become a married missionary.
Is that right?
So how does Silence fit in with the rest of Scorsese's filmography? Scorsese studied to become a priest in high school before switching course to pursue film at NYU. His Italian Catholic upbringing makes its mark on several of his earliest films, especially Mean Streets, which sees Harvey Keitel's character Charlie struggling to reconcile his Catholicism with his life in the mafia. The opening of the film sets up this dynamic with a godlike voiceover from Scorsese himself, addressing Keitel's character over a black screen.
You don't make up for your sins in the church. You do it in the streets. You do it at home. The rest is bullshit and you know it.
In Raging Bull, Catholicism entered the bedroom as the crosses and religious icons on the wall awkwardly clash with Jake and Vicky's attempts at physical intimacy. The symbols reflect his deeply entrenched hang-ups. Jake can't reconcile chaste adulation of his wife with a healthy sexual relationship. Scorsese would deal with Christianity more explicitly in The Last Temptation of Christ. In this retelling of the figure's early life, we see Jesus grapple with human temptations, ranging from self-doubt to lust, and the director's explorations of faith aren't confined to Christianity. In 1997's Kundun, he dramatizes the coming of age of the 14th Dalai Lama. All of these films look at faith in conflict with both external circumstances and inner demons. Scorsese's characters aren't saints, but human beings, and often ones who are frustratingly unlikable or consumed in self-destructive behaviors. Their limitations tend to come most overwhelmingly from within.
I don't think there's a director who's as able to portray characters who are inherently self-destructive, doing something that will not benefit them, and seemingly unable to stop doing so.
Silence gives us something a bit different with these characters. Instead of the self-destructive or self-absorbed character, we witness Rodriguez sacrificing himself. Ferreira explains that the Inquisitors will only spare 5 Japanese prisoners from further torture if Rodriguez apostatizes. Rodriguez is conflicted. Does renouncing his identity as a priest mean renouncing his faith? But he can't justify prolonging the suffering of others. He realizes that public renunciation is the only way to be inwardly faithful to the compass of his priesthood. So this conflict of religious piety becomes the conflict between external and internal identities, a divide Scorsese has dramatized time and again. Throughout his filmography, characters grapple with how to be moral in a world that's not, whether it's the mob, finance, or Las Vegas. The difference in Silence is that our main character actually does manage redemption, even if the path to it is counterintuitive. On first viewing, the cinematography, courtesy of Rodrigo Prieto, may feel the most distant from classic Scorsese. There's nothing like the breathtaking Copacabana tracking shot or cool pushes into close-ups that we get in his films shot by Michael Ballhaus. Silence is primarily composed of subtle, long takes and tableau shots that work with visibility and concealing what we hope to see. Its first shot is a long take of deep mist, obscuring our vision as we wait for figures to emerge. Furthering this motif of what can't be seen or known, Scorsese incorporates torches illuminating small spaces within expanses of extreme darkness, as characters plunge forward into the impenetrable, unseeable unknown to wrestle with religious belief and doubt. The stark, minimalist camera also captures violence in a different style than is usual for Scorsese. Think back to the bar fight in Mean Streets, which made use of quick cuts and a pop song by the Ronettes to make the violence seem jazzy and exciting. There's an adrenaline rush to this and other scenes of violence in Scorsese. In the end, the violence never offers a solution. It's an empty way for his characters to assert their masculinity, seek a more exciting life, or express their demons, and it generally leads to self-destruction. But in Silence, the violence is never enticing or exciting at all. It's procedural and excruciating. The Inquisitors torture practicing Christians as part of their program of religious persecution. In this scene, they tie 3 prisoners to crosses out at sea and allow them to die over the course of a few days as the tide rolls in and out. Witnessing violence becomes torture in and of itself. Later, Rodriguez is forced to watch an emaciated Garupe drown from a distance. Long takes and matter-of-fact wide shots force us to endure the violence with Rodriguez as a form of torture. We're no longer getting that ambivalent cinematic pleasure that we might have experienced in his earlier movies. It's a striking departure for a director who's known for how he shoots violence. Yet, it's also an in-your-face expression of the conclusion Scorsese has always come to, that violence doesn't pay, doesn't redeem, and isn't the answer.
And violence is something that in the American tradition is very often seen as redemptive. And for Scorsese, it's never redemptive. Redemption comes from somewhere else. We may think it's in violence, but it's not.
Even if much of Silence looks different, a few sequences visually evoke some of his most recognizable cinematic techniques. Most striking is the slow motion when Rodriguez apostatizes. The sound drops out and his movement takes on a physical grace and gravitas, deepening the impact of the act. This may remind you of the opening credits of Raging Bull. As Robert De Niro spars by himself, slow motion lends a certain beautiful stateliness to the introduction of his character, in contrast to the behavior we'll see in his life outside the ring. In that film, slow-mo also emphasizes heightened attention, focus, and paranoia. Throughout his filmography, Scorsese uses slow-mo to underscore key narrative moments, like when he emphasizes the importance of Robert De Niro's character in Mean Streets, Johnny Boy. The Rolling Stones' Jumpin' Jack Flash plays in Charlie's mind as he watches Johnny Boy approach through the red-lit hellscape of the bar, and the drawn-out moment establishes that these characters' lives are irrevocably intertwined. Scorsese's use of slow-mo might not seem revolutionary today, as it's been so often copied that it feels standard or even overused. But over the years, the director has experimented with the technique for maximum narrative impact, and in Silence, his sparing use of slow-mo for this single shot underscores it as the most crucial moment underpinning the story. Elsewhere in Silence, we see a few overhead shots, which Scorsese often uses to represent the eyes of God. Alfred Hitchcock, an important influence for Scorsese, was also well known for using crane shots, looming above the characters. These moments aren't about morally judging the characters, but simply suggesting that some power above is watching. Scorsese uses them after significant decisions or actions are taken, like at the end of Taxi Driver when the camera drifts above, surveying the extreme violence. In Silence, perhaps these shots give the spiritual presence of God a voice, or at least watchful eyes. So even if God may be silent, perhaps Scorsese creates a spiritual perspective through cinema itself, to imply that we're never truly alone. Silence gives us 3 strands of narration. 2 are letters, one from Ferrera and one from Rodriguez. detailing their experiences in Japan to the priests in Portugal. The third is Rodriguez's internal monologue.
Father in heaven, praised be thy name. I'm just a foreigner who brought disaster. And that's what they think of me now.
Narration might be one of Scorsese's most recognizable trademarks. We touched on it earlier with Mean Streets. Scorsese uses voiceover, often paired with appealing music, to entice the viewer into his worlds. In Goodfellas, Henry Hill's smooth, seductive narration aligns us with his perspective.
As far back as I can remember, I always wanted to be a gangster.
We go along with him at first, enjoying his youth spent idolizing gangsters. But as he descends into his increasingly erratic, drug-fueled paranoia, we start to reconsider accepting his skewed viewpoint. Here, and in other films like Taxi Driver, the seductive yet suspicious voiceover creates this growing disconnect between an unreliable narrator and us, the viewers, as the story inevitably goes south. Taxi Driver's Travis Bickle reads aloud his diary in voiceover, feeding the audience a Dostoevskian internal monologue.
Someday a real rain will come and wash all this scum off the streets.
From this privileged vantage point on the intimate psychology of Travis's downward spiral, we watch with foreboding, feeling uncomfortably at odds with his disturbing point of view and perhaps a little complicit in what we see. So we can conclude that a knowing play with perspective and morality is key to many of Scorsese's narrations. But in Silence, far from Travis Bickle's warped diary, we hear an earnest internal record, Rodriguez's struggle with God's silence in the face of human suffering. Instead of manipulating the outside viewer's perspective, the narrations in Silence follow spiritual journeys inward. All three narrations are delivered in the second person, or you, addressing either another character in the letters or God in Rodriguez's prayers. But despite Rodriguez's pleading, God doesn't respond to him. This is the silence of the title. Rodriguez is a man of faith without a response. During his imprisonment, his narration progresses from full sentences of prayer into pleading staccato bursts.
Apostatize, apostatize!
His crisis of faith punctuating the horrors on screen. Finally, as Rodriguez looks down at the fumier, we hear a new voice.
It's all right. Step on me.
So here, instead of using that narration to entertain us from a psychological distance as he's done before, Scorsese fine-tunes his technique to plant us deep inside Rodriguez's mind and include us in his intimate spiritual search.
The weight of your silence is terrible.
Last but not least, those endings. Scorsese tends to conclude his films with his protagonist in limbo, rather than triumph or total destruction. The character, often humbled or having left his glory days behind, is usually unable to achieve deep change, redemption, or self-understanding. Goodfellas' retired mobster Henry Hill leads a quiet life in suburbia. The Wolf of Wall Street's Jordan Belfort does a stint in a cushy jail before giving motivational seminars in New Zealand. And in Casino, the soundtrack of Jean-Luc Godard's Contempt plays, while Ace Rothstein reflects on his lost golden age of Vegas. In Silence, that feeling of limbo persists. Rodriguez is literally living out his final days in exile, having been forced to leave the church and assimilate into Japanese culture. But Scorsese offers a bit more closure for his character's inner state in this film. When the camera pushes inside of Rodriguez's casket, we see in the film's final shot that he's clutching a small wooden crucifix. Although he's been cast out into limbo, he isn't a stunted, static soul. He's held on to his faith through it all. So to return to our original question, how Scorsese is Silence, in the end, we can see that his classic toolkit and fascinations are written all over it. But he updates these familiar techniques to dig deeper into recurring themes, and the result mines new territory. Scorsese isn't content to make and remake the same film. Instead, he keeps his idiosyncrasies while continuing to evolve.
Indeed, only God can answer.